you can start.
Okay. We are ready. This is April 20th, Airport Advisory Commission. John Foley, present.
Yes. Do you want me to we'll call the meeting to order and we can do roll call?
Sure. Okay, so John, you're here. Lieutenant Colonel Edgecombe,
Present.
Douglas Bernizer,
I'm here.
Kat Pence is absent, Neil White,
Present.
and Mike Moreau.
Here.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I guess we'll move on to the next agenda item, which would be approving the agenda for this meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda that was distributed? And are there any additions? So if there's not, could I ask one of you to move to approve the agenda as distributed and maybe a second?
So moved, Neil.
I'll second it. Doug?
And we'll do a roll call vote since we're virtual. Doug Brenizer, do you approve the agenda as distributed?
Yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Edgecombe?
Yes.
Neil White?
Yes.
Mike Morrow?
Yes.
And John Foley votes yes. So I think we've approved the agenda. The next item is approving the minutes from the last meeting. And I'll ask if everyone's received and reviewed the minutes from the January 19th meeting.
Yes.
And are any corrections or edits needed to the minutes? If not, if I could ask for someone to move to approve the minutes as distributed. And a second.
So moved.
Second.
I
We got two of
All right. Almost don't need to vote at this point.
them.
We'll do the roll call vote again to approve the agenda or approve the minutes as distributed. Doug Brenizer,
Yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Edgecombe,
Yes.
Neil White,
Yes.
Mike Morrow,
Yes.
and John Foley votes yes. So we've approved the minutes and the agenda. The next agenda item is public comment. And because this is a virtual meeting, written comments from the public were solicited prior to the meeting. And as far as I know, we haven't received any. Is that correct, John? Or
That is correct. I have not received any.
awesome. All right. Well, then I think we'll move into the meat and potatoes start part of the meeting with our reports. And I guess we have a tower chief report. I guess, John, I don't know if you'll go over that.
I will, Mr. Chairman. We'll keep Rob's name on here in perpetuity, but he is once again working up in the tower cab tonight because he's still a staffer short. So he sent me a short report. So I'll run through that really quickly and then take any questions you might have back to Rob. He gave me a number of operations that doesn't seem correct. So I went back into my own numbers and I'll report those instead. For the first 3 months of 2022, January, February, March, total operations were 9,712. Which is about an 11% increase over the previous year. So continuing to trend in the right direction. That's actually quite a bit for January, February, March, considering the way the weather's been. So I'm pleased by that. Most of you probably are aware by now that back on January 29th, we did have a fatal accident on the airport. Beech 35 was cleared to land runway 34, veered left off the runway at the 1,000-foot marker and impacted the infield left of runway 34. That accident package was submitted by the tower, their portion of it, and the NTSB is continuing to investigate. So that's all the information we have on that one. Other than that, on February 3rd, there was an in-flight equipment malfunction noted. A Cessna 208 Caravan reported minor rudder issues inbound to Salem. ARF was dispatched as an alert one, but the aircraft landed without incident. And then we did have one bird strike on February 28th. Another Cessna 208 Caravan reported a bird strike on left wing strut at the 1,000-foot marker of runway 16. Airport Operations Department recovered a red-tailed hawk on runway 16, and the pilot later reported minimal damage to aircraft. No environmental or tower equipment to report. And he did want to say that he has one new controller in training, but he also has one newer controller that has now been hired by the FAA and will be leaving in the near future. So it sounds like, in talking to Rob, that the FAA is doing a lot of hiring right now. And so a lot of these towers are becoming pipelines up to FAA controllers. So he's kind of been a constant hiring and training pattern here. So other than that, that's everything that the tower chief provided to me. Are there any questions I can take back to Rob? All right. Hearing none.
All right. Do you want to, I know you distributed the, your manager's report with the minutes, so with the meeting packet. There was a lot of interesting stuff there. I don't know if there's anything you want to introduce, but
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I did send an updated, or Anita sent out an updated management report a couple of days ago because it was subsequent to a TSA meeting I had on Friday, most of the day Friday. So I don't have anything additional to add, but I do expect that because there's a lot of information there from the time we met in January till now, a lot has happened in terms of air service development. And so I try to capture the highlights in there, but I do expect that there'll be questions, clarifications, and so on. And I did note in there that likely there will be some AAC action items coming up in the next several weeks and months. So we're likely to have some special meetings called, and we'll just kind of cross those bridges when we get to them as we get to decision points at the city council level. What I would say, and I don't remember if it's in my report, is that tonight's meeting is, and essentially what's in my management report is almost identical to an information report that's going to city council on Monday night. To kind of help them get a broad, robust, kind of holistic picture of everything that's happened, because they're hearing bits and pieces of parts of it from the community, from the Air Service Development Group, through their constituents and so on. So we want to give them an update on everything that's happened in the past 3 to 6 months and let them know where we are now and what decision points they're going to face in the next few months as we move towards commercial air service at Salem. So you're reading essentially what the council is going to read. I want to make sure that always that you're in the loop and that you're on the same page as they are, so that as you get to these decision points, you're well versed, or fairly well versed, and are hearing the same information that the council's hearing. So with that, I'm happy to, I don't have any additions, but I'm happy to field any questions or clarifications that you might have.
well, great. I think the thing I will say, it's great to see we've got some real serious interest by regional carriers. That's, I was actually very surprised. And I know I have a bunch of questions about things you outlined in the report. And I also looks like this is really late breaking, so you may not have answers right now. So, but I guess I see that Neil has his hand raised. So Neil, would you
I'll do
like?
the best I can.
Okay, one more real quick question, John. I see that the airport master plan is scheduled for late in 22, late this year. When was the last master plan done?
Last master plan was completed in 2012. So just about August of 2012. So just about 10 years ago.
Okay, so, and that's kind of the outside limit to renew the master plan?
Well, they're 20-year plans, but typically, depending on how much change or activity there is at your airport, oftentimes airports will redo them every 10 to 12 or so years. So yeah, we're right about there now, particularly with our facility issues, our secondary runway issues, things that we talked about with the council back in April, and now with commercial air service, there's definitely a need to revisit some of the master planning concepts that weren't really contemplated back in 2012, commercial air service being one of them, terminal improvements, parking improvements, and so on. So we actually have I got the scope of work from the consultants today, got it approved through the FAA. So we're moving towards a city council request to apply for the master plan grant from the FAA. So that'll go in the next probably month or so as well. So it's kind of separate from air service, but it's happening this year. And I know that a couple of you have reached out and expressed your interest in serving on the planning advisory committee for that master plan effort. So that's great. I have you on my list, and we'll probably in the next maybe 60 days or so, I would guess maybe 90 days. Well, within the next 6 months, maybe 3 to 6 months, we'll start putting that together. We have you'll notice in my airport manager's report too, we've got some construction happening this summer. The FAA's got some construction happening this summer. So there's a lot going on at one time. So we're trying not to overload ourselves and to undertake too much at one time where something slips and we're not focused on things we need to be focused on. So the master plan may push to the end of the summer or may start midsummer, and it just sort of depends. Also depends on when the FAA grants us the funds.
Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
All right, who else has questions?
I've got one. Yeah.
Okay.
It may be a little early, so maybe this is a question that I'd like to see answered at a future time, but in your report, you'd mentioned that as we look towards air service, there's going to be a kind of a change in the overall operations of kind of the airport, the runway, and the areas surrounding it with regards to security.
Right.
And I guess I'd be interested as we go down that path and evaluate that to understand how that's going to impact our various stakeholders, especially given that we've been kind of not, I don't say loose in the derogatory sense, but we've been kind of free range with things like, open house days for the museum and just general access for, folks that are tenants of both corporate tenants as well as, tenants of the different hangars and buildings. So I like to understand that in particular about, air show, small air show type activities and the museum, which I know is generally open to the public right now and pretty accessible. And so I'd like to understand how that might impact that. And I know they may have their own long range plans of where they're going to be and what they're going to do. And maybe that factors into this.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very broad question, and I'm sure it's a question a lot of folks are going to have, probably folks on this call and others. But certainly when you ramp up to commercial air service, you move from a general aviation security posture up to a commercial air service security posture in your AOA, your aircraft operations area, which for us is the majority of the land inside the perimeter fence. So there are going to be more strict requirements for criminal history, background checks, badging, access controls, free range movement of people and where they can and can't go, guests. So the long story short will be that anybody that needs or requests unescorted access to the airfield is going to have a criminal history background check, or they're going to have to be escorted by somebody that is a badged individual. So part of the heavy lift here for us is going to be, we're going to have to stand up an entire new security program. It's going to be even different from the one we had last time we had the air service in 2007, 2008. Obviously regulations and things have changed, but it's also a different program because we're looking at aircraft that are larger in size. So the TSA has a smaller program that's allowed for aircraft with fewer than 60 seats, but aircraft more than 60 seats, it's what's called the complete program, and it's a much more robust program. So I don't have all the details yet. It's a great question, but as we put our program together and get it through the TSA approval process, obviously there'll be a ton of outreach to tenants, stakeholders, and others, and let them know what that impact is to them. For instance, we have businesses that have public frontage, but they also have access to the airfield out the back. So there's going to have to be a more secure, controlled environment in those businesses. Garmin's a perfect example. I'm sure they have a pretty robust system now. FedEx is another one. The FBO is another one. So those are things that TSA will inspect, and they'll want to know how those controls, what they are and how they're going to be managed, and they'll be inspected, and there'll be much more stringent security on this airport from front to back is the long and short of it. So, if you're Neil White and you come in a fence to go fly your 150, it's going to be different than it is today. and if I come around and say, Neil, I need to see your badge, you may not necessarily have to have it hanging around your neck, but you need to have it with you and available if somebody does, and random vehicle inspections and a lot of things we don't have to do now in a GA, general aviation security posture, we are going to have to do going forward. So it's going to be a lot. I don't have my arms wrapped around all of the requirements yet, but the meeting I had with TSA on Friday, which prompted the change to the management report, I wanted to include some of that in there because there will be some changes, and I imagine there will be some pushback from some folks that maybe aren't too pleased about having to participate in that level of background checking and badging and security. So hope that answers your question.
do you have a feel for whether that would apply to, for Garmin as an example, they have 530 employees,
Right.
most of which, don't necessarily have any need to access the airfield directly, but some do. Would
Right.
those background checks only apply to those
That's my
employees?
understanding. Yeah, only to anyone that needs, either requires or requests access to the airfield. So that would be Garmin's decision to identify to the TSA, to us, which folks those are, who may and may not. So that would be something that your company would want to delineate. Certainly, we don't want to background check and badge 500 plus people that will never go into the hangar bay or never access the airfield. FedEx is another example, but I believe the TSA already does inspections on Garmin, does security inspections, and on FedEx. They've been doing them for a long time. FedEx carries cargo, so they already have inspections, and they have a security program in place. So it could be that their security program will be included in ours as their own separate standalone program. Garmin may be the same. But you're right, it won't be everybody. I think the National Guard is probably another good example. Certainly they have their own security protocols over there. I don't expect that we would background check and badge every single reservist that comes on and off the airfield. But those are details that we're going to have to figure out as we go along, and where the lines are drawn for the TSA as far as what they worry about and what they don't.
Mhm. I guess one related question, there's a background check, and presumably some of these background checks fail.
Mhm.
And for, say, like airport tenants, individuals, if they don't pass that background check, does that, does that invalidate a lease, or what kind of things fall out of that? And
Yeah.
it may be premature, but those are
Yeah,
questions.
I don't have that level of detail yet. So a couple of things that I'm doing in the interim is making a couple of trips to a couple other Oregon commercial service airports to review their security protocols, ask those type of questions, understand how they manage those things. We'll have to set up our own airport specific program, but it's good to understand kind of across the board how these other airports are allowed to function. When the background checks, the criminal history background checks, and if you read the TSA regulations, they're available online if you want to read them. It's TSA 49 CFR Part 1542, if you're interested. And it lists in there all the things they're looking for. And it's all the big stuff. It's murder and hijack and robbery and arson and all the really bad things. They're not looking at, parking tickets and things you did in high school, those sorts of things, but things that would impact commercial aviation in a negative way. If there are people that don't pass that check and they're not authorized to be on the airport, I don't know what that means in terms of their ability to remain on the airport, if there's an appeal process, or I don't know the answers to those things yet, but my expectation is that something will come up. There will be some pushback from some people that won't want to go through it, and I don't know what that means in terms of our enforcement of that. Or our inability or ability to have the program approved by the TSA. If it impacts that, then the city's going to have to make a decision about what that means. And of course, we'll take TSA guidance on how we handle those individual matters. So lots more to come on those things. My first trip will be to Medford here at not next week, but the week after. I'll spend a day or so down there reviewing their security program and talking to their security coordinators and badging folks and stuff. So.
Okay. I guess I noticed the other
Tell you
thing that jumped out at me as kind of a trick was the, there's some new staff that's going to be required, full-time staff. And I know, do you have any idea or what you might pitch to city council for funding mechanisms for those? It's not something that you would get a grant for, I don't think, right?
No, grant money can't be used for airport operations and maintenance. So at some point, we're going to have to do sort of a cost benefit analysis for council, I think. This is why part of the reason we wanted to have an information report go first, so that they could kind of wrap their arms around all of the upcoming requirements, and then we'll handle those in bite-sized pieces. But we'll do a cost benefit analysis, because there'll be some revenue from increased parking and fuel flowage and things. And then what's the gap between that and what it's going to cost me to staff, increase staffing at the airport, and other costs, badging costs and background check costs and those sorts of things. So I don't know those numbers yet, but it's going to be pretty robust. And I think it's going to be one where the airport fund won't be able to support that. So we'll have to seek some external support, whether that's city general fund or transient occupancy tax funds or some other resources that whether we can pay those back down the road when we have a more robust revenue stream, or I don't know the answers to those things yet, but certainly we have to contemplate the cost versus the benefit and see what the city council's take is on those things. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm worried
good
I stepped.
question. And Mike had another question, it looks like.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it was actually a follow-on to John's earlier question and comments and thoughts. I don't know if we have anybody in the queue for new tenants, but or how the lease process works, but it might be a good opportunity for any new tenants coming in to rework the lease a little, to let us have an out in that kind of prickly scenario that John mentioned around what if they don't meet the background yet they're a paying tenant. If that's not covered in the lease, it could get a little messy.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that's on my plate is to go back and kind of review the standard lease template and see what's in there. Off the top of my head, the first thing that kind of sticks in my mind is that all lessees are required to follow local, state, and federal regulations. So just that sort of broad concept right there tells me that you're going to have to follow the federal regulations, or you'll be out of compliance with your lease. And if you either choose not to or you can't, I don't know if there's any provisions for corrective action, or if you'd have to sell and move your airplane someplace else. I mean, I don't want to see any of that kind of thing happen. But I think it's important early on here to let folks know that these are the kind of things that are coming. They are going to have impacts to other people on the airport besides just those around the terminal area and out on the ramp. And they're not big things. I think it's, I've done this at other places. It doesn't feel like a huge impact to the general aviation community, but it's an impact. It's different. It will be different.
Other questions from the committee?
I was just looking back at my notes. I had one other minor thing. You had mentioned in passing that to make space for some of the potential improvements, you may have to move a bunch of files. And I guess my only thought there, having been through this with some other, in this case, nonprofits that I've worked with, that's always a good opportunity to review whether or not it's time to digitize them and put them in the cloud and destroy the hard copy if there's not requirements or regulatory aspects of why you have to keep them. So I just throw it out there. I don't have the mechanism to do that, but I can help you with that if that's of interest.
Right. Well, Anita, who's on the line here with us, she's and we're hiring a new person that starts next week. But that's some of the information we'll have to get is what's the drop dead date on some of these files? Are they already electronically filed and we're just storing some old boxes and we can dispose of those? And so files are fairly small, but we've got a lot of equipment and old plan sets and just lots and lots of stuff rat holed around the terminal that is going to have to find a new home, along with some equipment. I mean, we're going to have to buy all of the ground handling equipment that we don't currently have, loading bridges and tugs and everything. And ideally, you won't keep that just sitting out in the weather year after year after year. You'll put it inside when you're not using it. So we're going to look for a space, I think, that we'll probably have to lease from someone. I've got some ideas of some hangars that maybe would be available for that type of a use, to convert them to an aviation use as they're supposed to be, and maybe help the airport out and help themselves out. So we'll have to cross that bridge as well. So there's lots to do. Yeah, those are good. That's good advice. You'll be hearing a lot more about this in the next several weeks and months. I'm sure we'll be a busy AAC this year.
Great.
Yeah.
We've all been waiting for years. People have been asking, what are we doing here?
So I guess maybe one last question, John. I guess I noticed in your report that you said that we've got one letter of interest and there might be one or two more in the pipeline. Is that, I mean, assuming we can overcome all these hurdles, which I think we ought to hope we can. And does that mean that we would be Salem would be in the option of choosing one of multiple, or would we have multiple carriers, or what's the thought there? Is that
we would have multiple carriers, the three that are interested, and I think it's likely that the two that I don't have a letter of interest from yet may likely now start before the one I do have a letter of interest for. They just, as we go along, they have to change their planning to accommodate our planning because we have a lot of work we need to do yet. So, but it's likely that we would have all three. They will fly to different destinations. I think between the three, we'd probably capture about 7 or so destinations total. Phoenix, Las Vegas, the LA Basin, San Francisco, Las Vegas, There are a lot of those that are on the table. Reno, and then some growth plans. Some of those folks are talking about, we start here, but we're going to here, and they're adding, one of them in particular is looking at Salem to possibly be the sort of their northwest hub. So rather than flying out of Portland, all these destinations, you see the route maps, they fly to Salem instead. So we'll see where all that goes. But yeah, I think we're talking about multiple carriers, and our terminal have a hard time handling more than one at a time. So I had a meeting today with one of the Air Service Development Committee folks, and we talked about how, for years we've been talking about waiting for the good problems to have. And these are now the good problems to have.
Yeah. First cabin.
It's a heavy lift. There's a lot to do. It's a little overwhelming because we still have a whole airport to run and sort of our day-to-day work. So this is a lot of extra, but it's good problems to have. So we're going to talk to City Council on Monday night, and then I think we're going to be wheels up from there and be rolling in the next few months.
Is this a hard nibble, or can we set a hook here, or is it really still too early to say if any of this?
It's really too early to say. The tricky thing with the airlines is that there really is there's no binding agreement for them to start service or to sustain service. They could tell us they're coming and then they may not show up. So there's certainly some risk reward here, and council needs to be aware of that we could do a lot of work and a lot of investment in infrastructure and employees and time and all of that. And we don't know what the future will hold. We don't know about pandemics, and we don't know about geopolitical things and fuel prices and recessions and all those things we can't control. So we have to at some point make a go, no go decision. We're either going to go full bore ahead and we're going to tackle all of these things and figure out the funding mechanisms and make it all happen, or we're going to pause and say we're not ready yet, or we'll get ready over time and the airlines can come when they want to. But that's tricky to do it that way. You really want to strike when the iron's hot. Airlines are interested now. We need to get ourselves ready now. And so we've got a lot of things to figure out, but it's a long way of saying that there is no guarantee. There's always going to be a risk. That's just the way it works. And that's every airport. It's not just Salem. Carriers leave markets all the time when economic conditions change. So we just don't know. But we're actually the benefactor of what's happened over COVID. And the costs at PDX continuing to go up, and the costs at Eugene continuing to go up, and other markets that aren't as fruitful, and airlines looking for lower cost options. And we're certainly a low cost airport at this time. So we're fitting their business model at the moment.
Okay. Any other questions for John?
All
All
right.
right. If not, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for that report. That was super
Well,
interesting
Yeah, it's a lot.
and exciting. Let's see. So we've gone through the tower report, airport manager's report. The next agenda item are action items, and we did not have anything that was publicly announced, so there's no action items from this meeting. So the next item would be any other items for commission discussion. I don't know if, Doug, do you have something you would like to discuss?
Two quick things, if it's all right, John. One
Sure.
is that I just read this afternoon that one of the announcements that President Biden will make tomorrow is that PDX is going to get a earthquake-proof runway. I can't imagine how that's going to happen, but that will probably impact all the wonderful work that Neil's been doing. The other thing I wanted to say is that the Northwest Aviation Conference this year was very reminiscent, in my mind, of the pre-COVID. Lots of people, lots of interest in people looking for pilots, people looking for air traffic controllers, and lots of younger folks, which is always a good thing, and some kind of interesting aircraft. So I think things are starting to pick up all across the board. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Which reminds me, Mr. Chairman, if I can jump back in, I'll just do another quick update or two. We Salem are also a recipient of some additional grant funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed recently. So for the next 5 years, we'll be eligible for an additional $295,000 in grant funding on top of the $150,000 that we receive in terms of entitlements every year. So it equates to about $445,000 in grant funding every year for the next 5 years, which is great. So those projects that money will probably continue to be rolled over every year until we complete our master plan and figure out what the next project priorities are. but that's, it's a significant amount of money. The other thing I was alerted to just the other day is that there are 32 air traffic control towers in the United States that are slated in this infrastructure bill for new towers, and Salem is actually on that list. It's more than 40 years old, whatever other criteria there was. So the national coordinator for that program reached out to me yesterday and reached out to the tower manager to just start the discussions about where the new tower is going to be. Will it be in the same location and all those sorts of things? So somewhere in the next 5 years, we're likely to have a new air traffic control tower as well. And of course, they're still trying to figure out, does that mean does this money include the demolition of the existing tower and so on and so forth? And so that's some interesting news too. So Salem's going to be the beneficiary of quite a bit of the infrastructure funding that was passed.
Very nice. All we need is more controllers.
Yeah.
So we can have Rob come to these meetings.
Yes, I'm sure he misses them.
All right. Well, is there any other items for the commission's discussion today?
Sir, this is Nathan Edgecombe. I just thought I'd give you a little update if I could. I attended the Army Association of Aviators of America. It's a big thing in Tennessee. And I got to see all the future vertical lift helicopters that the military is considering purchasing. And we're pushing very hard to get some of those for the Oregon National Guard. And we think we might be in the first fielding, and we could have them in 2028. It's pretty exciting. They're tandem rotor systems, or sort of like the Osprey. There's a couple that they're deciding, but just thought I'd share that with the group.
Excellent.
Interesting.
Yeah, it'll be neat to see those. Yeah.
Great.
Said
Yeah, they're
2028.
amazing. They're helicopters that fly, 250 miles an hour.
Mm.
All right. Okay. Well, is there anything else?
Just got one minor thing. Speaking of rotorcraft, I was surprised to see there weren't very many complaints of noise. Just from my own personal experience, as well as what I saw a lot on social media in the last few weeks. There have been two very unusual situations. I actually enjoy the noise, so maybe that's why maybe other people do too, why they didn't complain. But Columbia Helicopters has been doing a lot of dual rotor late night work, like 10 p.m. And later, all around kind of in the surrounding area around Salem. And then there was Bell 206 that was tracking pretty much every arterial in Salem. They went over, for example, by my house, over Madrona, about as low as they could, doing, I don't know what, some sort of mapping or something. And the track maps on them are very interesting to just see them actually drawing out the Salem city map in the air. I don't know what these operations are. The fact that we haven't gotten any complaints, I guess everybody's okay, and that's good. I'm frankly kind of surprised, because both cases have caught my attention as being above and beyond normal noise.
Yeah. One thing I'll say, and I'm going to have to go in a couple of minutes, is we get a lot of phone calls and inquiries asking what some of these operations are, but a lot of folks don't want to file a formal noise complaint because they're really not annoyed by the noise or concerned by it. They're more interested than anything else. So that might be part of it. I've also found that over the years that the kind of chronic noise complainers, the folks that would used to call all the time, kind of understand now sort of how it goes and what they are, and the complaints have waned some for that reason. And I think also the third thing is that a lot of folks now understand the difference between, say, guard helicopter activity and other than guard activity. And so I think a lot of the public outreach and education over the years has really helped people understand what's going on out there. And so that is some of it.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, noting that John's about out of time here, if we don't have any other items for discussion, I'd like to move on to the last two items of the agenda. Is that okay?
Carry on.
All right. Well, the chair's report, since the chair's not here, I didn't have anything prepared, so we'll move directly on to the last item, which is adjournment. So I thank everybody for coming today, and and having a good discussion. And I look forward to learning more about commercial air service in Salem. It's exciting.
Lots to come. And thank you all. I appreciate your accommodating me, my time and everything too. So always reach out if you have any other questions.
Kudos to your son, John.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
no
Yep.
kidding.
Patience.
Can't wait. Thanks. See y'all soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye now.